And then there will be internal stresses that happen. The decisions that you make both internally and by an extension externally of how you handle that stress will shape not only your brain, it'll also shape your life and it will shape your body and it will shape everything that the world that you know it. It'll shape that too.
Oh my God, I'm stressed the hell out. Let me go doom scroll social media. Let me go binge food. Let me, get certainty and control in these other areas of my life because now I feel like I can at least control something because I can't control everything else. Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
And it's Emilia. Welcome back. Guys, I'm so excited to talk about this episode. I shared with you that I'm semi nervous
Oh
because
yeah.
of the fact that this might get some steam. But honestly, I feel like we've been saying that a lot with these episodes lately. So, spicy spice. So, okay. So, I've shared with you recently that one of my, I don't even want to say guilty pleasures because I literally have zero guilt, just glimmers. So, it's actually a glimmer. One of my glimmers as of late has been filling up my social media feed so that when I am in there, I have all of this new data and awarenesses that are coming to me that I'm welcoming with open arms. And a lot of it just so happens to be around my glimmers, which are watching like infants go to like chiropractors for their own body um, changes and helping pretty much the toddlers, the infants, and those who are in such wildly important developmental stages go through these like contortions which look like you're gonna like snap the baby's neck, but they're so resilient and they're so like just so beautiful, perfect little beings. And why does this relate to this episode? Because one of the things that I've been sharing with you kind of through that is this is no news to you, no surprise to you, but stress has always been something that I have studied
Hmm.
amongst a whole lot of other things, right? But like stress in particular has been something that I have known far too well because your girl loves to stress herself out for no reason. It is pervasive. And as a result of those, I have super, super anxious parts that like are always zooming
Hmm.
into the future. As a result, I've had to learn stress practices of managing, escorting the stress out of my life, et cetera, et cetera. And so, why I mention that is that this is always on my dashboard. This is always on my radar. This is always something that I'm helping clients with. And on my little moments where I just want to glimmer, I'm looking at babies and how they navigate stress through a chiropractor's um, practice. It's amazing. So recently, I've been in some of the scientific literature and I was so freaking excited to see that there are finally studies being published about pregnant women and pregnant women's brain changes through their process of pregnancy.
Mm.
And this is super relevant for, I know, a lot of our community members because a lot of them are women who have children, are women who want to break the cycle before they have children. And a lot of, their partners, maybe while they might not be listeners or community members of Evolvers, but we do have a lot of men in the community too. And we talk to them. And one of the biggest struggles that we've seen when it comes to men is these dynamics that pertain to the emotional landscape of relationships, right? A lot of guys that I've spoken to and community members are they get very stressed out because they don't know how to navigate the emotions that come up in their personal life, but then when it comes to managing and engaging with their female counterparts, it's a whole different world. So you'll hear more often than not, the guys saying like, "Well, she just went off, and I didn't know how to kind of comfort her," or things like that of that nature. So, okay, a little all over the place. With that being said, why I mention what I mention is because the research that has come out when it comes to females' brains and how much the brain actually does change when it comes to pregnancy is finally the evidence that's stacking up that illuminates so many people's experiences. I don't know if you've ever heard, and I talked to you just before this episode about mommy's brain. Mommy's brain is something that I've heard with so many of my clients when it like in the first, 3 years of um their newborn child and a little bit before, right? Which is essentially you lose all your memory, you don't know where you put stuff. Like it's just so much stress that's on your plate and on your body trying to conceive and grow this child within you that it literally alters your brain chemistry. And why I got so excited to talk about this is not only because, let's just be real, shout out to the OG women that now finally have, some validation out there in the scientific community around how it actually changes the gray matter and your brain. And all together, there's a whole different structural changing when it comes to the chemistry of a mommy's brain. And the purposes of that are obviously to make sure that, she can bond adaptively and provide the resources and support for her children. But with that being said, I think that the research actually correlates to a lot of elements around stress management that not only has not been as, shall we say, pervasive, but it's brought, from my perspective, light into the stress management world and how we navigate as a society, how we look at stress, how we observe stress, how we experience stress, and most importantly, how we navigate stress through our central nervous system when there is alterations in our neurochemistry because of stress, and how specific to our evolved community, how when we are not managing our stress, that's the terminology that a lot of people use, when we are not actively confronting the stressors that come up naturally in our day-to-day life, and when we do not have a plan, a toolkit, adaptive coping mechanisms to manage and transform our stress into something that's healthy and adaptive and moving through our bodies, how much it actually can degrade the matter that is within our brain that helps us become our very best version of ourselves and helps us to evolve. So, for example, if you're someone that's listening to this podcast and you feel as though your day to day stressors are overwhelming you, right? You might even feel like you have mommy brain, right? What are the hormones that are popping off in your body and how are those being moved through you? I have one client in mind, for example. She is a mother of a child who's now 3 years old, and she's finally going and doing Pilates workouts. And she's actually moving her body, which from a stress management standpoint, we're looking at that and seeing how is that actually changing your neurochemistry? How is that changing how you feel about yourself, right? From a place of independence, from a place of interpersonal dynamics and how she relates as a mother to the world, but also how she shows up in work, how she shows up in her partnership, how much more confidence she's able to exude when she walks into a room. It's a whole different game. And so I want to get into this because I obviously nerd out around this subject, but I also think it's going to be important for anyone that listens to this episode to consider this when it comes to your day to day stress management, your day to day view of stress, and your day to day interaction with the women that are out there who are undergoing, statistically speaking, an absorbent amount of stress that when you look at the evolution of stress studies, were not brought into the equation, were not studied as much as male gendered individuals. Okay. So, B, I know that you and I said let's have a dialogue around this, not only from bringing in that research, but also the day to day stuff. Talk to me. What have you seen? What have you witnessed? What has been helpful from a CBT standpoint when it comes to stress management, viewing stress, how that interacts with people's day to day, all things stress?
I think number one, we have to understand that there's a difference between good stress and bad stress.
Hmm.
And there's also a very big difference between stress and challenges.
Hmm.
There is such a thing as good stress. The difficulty within that is that most of us don't recognize that and we're not going through the good stress. Most of us just feel like we're being negatively stressed out all day, every day. And when you have negative stress and it doesn't feel like there's a way to handle it and navigate it, that's where we need to develop really healthy coping skills, which unfortunately most of us don't do because most of us don't have
Hmm.
a good therapist or a good coach or people in their life that promote really healthy well-being and mental health. Stress is any external pressure that's put on you. If we want to make a really just simple definition of it, would you agree with that? It's internal or external pressure.
Yeah, I would say the way that it like it's a stimulus, right? So pressure is a way in which most people describe the feeling of it, right? It feels like pressure. Yeah.
So it's internal or external. We can put stress on ourselves through our expectations, through our perceptions, through um, the confines in which we put ourselves in, our belief structures. There's also external stress. So if Emilia sends me a deadline of like, "Hey B, I need a 10-page paper tomorrow," like, all right, homie. That's that's external, right? It's coming from something outside of me.
Hmm.
That's just stress in and of a nutshell. Now there's good stress and bad stress. There's eustress, which is adaptive.
Can I reframe that really quick to productive and counterproductive stress? Thank
I appreciate the reframe.
you.
There's
Good
adaptive and
stress.
maladaptive, productive and unproductive, good,
Thank you.
bad, whatever label you want to use, but adaptive and maladaptive is probably a little bit better, or
Mm,
productive, non productive.
thank you.
The challenge with that, though, is that we typically feel like we can't control that. So it just feels bad, right?
Right.
Um, but there's eustress, which is stressors that we can utilize to help us grow and evolve and change and make progress, which is more challenge, right? It serves us in some way. So if Emilia, let's say, challenges me to do a rough draft of something and send it to her, my interpretation, I could frame it as, oh, this is a cool opportunity for me to get really good at something and to get better at something. Okay.
Mm,
It's stressful because it's outside of my current capabilities.
mhm,
And I have a growth mindset. So let me see how I can learn from this. Let me see how I can use this as something to get better.
mm,
The maladaptive, non productive stress is when we believe it exceeds our current capabilities. We believe it exceeds our current competencies.
mm,
It's something that we can't handle. It's something we don't want. We don't like it. It's difficult. And we don't feel like we have the tools to get better from it or to make any changes. So it's seen as bad.
right.
This is the stress that most people are talking about when they say that they're stressed out.
Yeah.
Not only that, but most people also don't believe that they can use stress to be adaptive and productive. So all stress just feels like harmful stress. It feels like negative stress. So,
Mm,
why am I saying all of this? Why does this matter? Because number one, when it comes from a CBT perspective, it's our interpretation of these situations that determine whether this is productive or non productive.
mm,
A lot of the challenges that we experience, if we try to reframe it, so like perfect example, you reframing it as good and bad to productive and non-productive. That's a really adaptive reframe that you can now use to help yourself navigate this, to change the feelings and the emotions associated with it. Now, you take a pregnant woman
mm,
and you put her under, her body is already going under stress trying to carry this fetus to term, trying
right.
to develop this fetus, trying to do the things that it needs to have the bonding and to nurture it and develop it in the way that it needs to so that it can come out to being a fully functioning adaptive infant.
Mhm,
When you put that much stress, just internally, automatically, that level of stress on a woman's body, it it's crazy the changes that it has. And anybody going through stress, it literally changes the way that your brain works.
yeah.
So when you're having these insane amounts of stress put on you, And on top of that, the people, places, and things in your life are not supporting you to navigate through this. It's a recipe for disaster. And that's why so many of us feel like we can't manage or navigate the stress that we're experiencing because we don't believe that we have the tools and the people and the resources to really help us get through this.
Mm.
So it's just like I have all of these problems, I have all of these things going on. There's nothing I can do about it. I have no support. Oh my god, I'm stressed the hell out. Let me go doom scroll social media. Let
Yeah.
me go binge food. Let me, get certainty and control in these other areas of my life because now I feel like I can at least control something because I can't control everything else. We don't realize that it's number one, the interpretations and the narratives that we're having that are really feeding our feelings of stress. And number two, the people, places, and things in our life that are either really helping us to navigate these challenges and become more, or that are really destructive and harmful and are making us feel even more incapable of handling everything. So, from a CBT lens, if a client were to come to me and say, I'm feeling extreme stress, it's like, okay, what are all of the things in your life? Are the people, places, and things serving you, or are they detracting from you? What are the
Mhm.
beliefs that you have about stress? Do you feel as though this is a challenge that you're going to grow from and get better from? Or are you telling yourself that this is horrible and miserable and there's nothing you can do about it and you just have to now learn how to cope?
Yeah. There's a client that comes to mind right now who's going through this so much, and I'm so freaking proud of her because honestly, like, one of the calls that I, had with her recently, it was just it ended in tears and just the amount of times that I wish I could reach through the screen and just freaking hug people. Oh
Oh,
my
same.
god.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my hugs are infinite with clients, and so, that's pretty much how our session ended, and so much gratitude and so much pride and reverence and respect for her because the amount of stress, external and internal, that has been injected into her life by the series of events that have unfolded, especially when it comes to the people that she cares about and really, really big life events. For example, getting a new place, finally moving into her home, right? Finally saying yes again to her partner and saying, "Let's do this.
Mm,
Let's dive back in. Let's start fresh," right? Having a partner get a diagnosis that is unimaginable and the odds of life continuing beyond 3 years being statistically not good. On top of that, trying to raise children who are in their really formative developmental years. On top of that, animals, right? On top of that, neighbors trying to bake cookies and say hi and like everything's okay. On top of that, trying to hold down a new career and build. And then on top of that, trying to develop her skill sets. And then on top of that, going to school to get
wild.
another degree. Like just the amazing things that this woman has persevered through. The call ended with tears and love and reverence and respect. And one of the things that I celebrated the hell out of her for was because I had said to her, anyone in your position could and would so easily turn towards a maladaptive coping strategy, and anyone and most people in your position would turn towards drugs and alcohol medication to numb out the pain and the challenge that this stress is inducing within your body, within your system. And I'm so proud of her because of the fact she gave herself that moment with me. And we essentially communicated on how it is ultimately like a past version of her would have probably chosen that, right? And just think about to this episode how stress really shapes you, that version of her a couple of years ago, if she was going through the same series of external induced stressors and internal induced stressors, how she would so easily turn towards medication, which is what doctors are kind of nudging her in the direction of, right? And alcohol, which is what friends and support systems are making okay given her life circumstances, and like kind of turning a blind eye, like, encouraging that, if to manage the pain, manage the stress, manage the really the big stuff that's going on in her world. A version of her 3 years ago, she said, hands down, Emilia, I would have been that person. I would have been another statistic of how my body would decay because I'm not taking care of my mind, because I'm not learning the healthy adaptive coping strategies to deal with this stress, to manage it, and most importantly to this conversation be to reframe what's happening right now. Now, I'm not lying to myself saying that these things aren't happening. I'm not deluding myself into thinking that everything's gonna get better, because we all know that things get worse before they get better. However, the way in which her frame of mind is looking at all of this is like warrior style, embracing the challenge, embracing the suck, knowing that suffering is a part of life, and believing in her own capabilities to pull her through that. And where that ends, where she doesn't feel like she has that within her tool set or capabilities. This is what I'm celebrating the most out of. And this is what I hope listeners of today's podcast episode kind of walk away with, where your resources end, your internal resources to manage your own stress, to navigate the coping skills that you have, to reframe what's going on in your world, and deal with your stress or balance it, right? She reached out and continues to lean on her support systems. As her coach, that is something that honestly I'm so proud of her for doing, because it would be so easier to just totally shrink up, to be isolated, to go through what she's going through alone. And what does that do to her body, right? What does that do to her soul? What does that do to her spirit? What does that do to her mind and her frame, like the frame of mind and the mental state that she's in, right? So to this, example, we all need support. We all have stresses that are going to come into our life, right? Whether it's you trying to have a child, or your son or daughter, they're having a child, or whether it be work, right? We just spoke with someone earlier today who moved across country, from the Northeast to down South, right? There's going to be stresses in the external world that are placed upon you. You might welcome that with open arms. You might not have had a choice, right? And then there will be internal stresses that happen. The decisions that you make, both internally and by an extension externally, of how you handle that stress will shape not only your brain, it'll also shape your life, and it will shape your body, and it will shape everything that the world that you know it. It'll shape that too. And I think that that's what's so powerful about this community, about be the work that you and I do in this world, because it helps people understand you can be. I picture like the person behind, I don't know if have you ever done ceramics or pottery? Oh, okay. I'm picturing like this. You've seen a picture of it though, right? Like
Yeah, I know
where
what
there's
it
the
is, I've just
potter.
never done it.
Oh, okay. We should do that definitely one time. But that's what I'm picturing, because the stress is the ball, right? The clay that's in front of you on the spinning wheel. That spinning wheel is representative of life. Life is just going to keep spinning, right? The world's going to keep spinning, and stress is
Yeah.
on that table. And you can use yourself as the analogy as that beautiful sculptor of the stress that's in front of you. And you can, by the force of your own being, by the help that you bring into your life, by the resources that you equip yourself with, you can cultivate that stress into, a pitcher to bring water to your family, right? You can make it into something that is so extraordinary, that can really help you build a life worth living, a life with
Mhm.
meaning. Or you can literally just slap it down and let that thing keep spinning and have it go splat all over the place. And honestly, I've been there. So you're not alone if you've been in that space. However, I implore and encourage anyone listening to this episode to do a little something to help manage that stress. I encourage every single one of you to equip yourself with resources, people who can be in your life that have a plethora of skill sets to be able to navigate stress, to be able to frame stress a little bit better. So, with that, from mommy brains to daddies trying to support mommies to all the people that have gone through any stress that they've experienced and been overwhelmed with or felt pressurized with, like stress really does shape you. It shapes your brain, it shapes you from the inside out, and it will do so from the outside in. So, with that being said, my episode suggestion, if you like this episode, head over to 257 Motivation Monday, Why We Struggle to Change. B.
Mine is 290, Why We Self Sabotage. I also just want to say really quick before we wrap up and really highlight something that you said. We are not saying be full blown delulu and like say that there's no issues and nothing is going on and everything is fine and get into this really destructive headspace, because that is how people end up self sabotaging. You're trying to convince yourself that nothing is wrong, and then you have a massive downturn. What we
Great.
are saying is take things as they are and recognize that you have more competencies and capabilities to handle these things than you currently believe. We have the resources available to us to get better and to have other people, places, things that can help us get through it. So, if you don't want to self sabotage, if you want to learn how to handle stress better, if you don't want to pass this stuff on to your kids, all of this are things that you can really do and utilize. And getting help is a beautiful way, it's a beautiful step on that journey that we hope you all utilize. We hope you all enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.